You know, the whole like van life thing?
Hmm.
It's really captured a lot of people's imaginations, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has.
That idea of the open road and just freedom,
Mhm.
to go wherever you want, whenever you want.
Yeah, that's the dream.
But sometimes,
Yeah.
and as we're going to kind of unpack in this deep dive into the Moab murders,
Okay.
sometimes that pursuit of freedom can lead you right into danger's path.
Right into the path of danger.
Exactly.
It's, I mean,
Yeah, it's a fascinating paradox, isn't it?
it is.
The desire for that escape and solitude can sometimes make you more vulnerable.
Yeah.
And this case really highlights that.
Yeah, and this case really highlights that dark side of the van life dream.
Exactly.
So we're looking into the tragic deaths of Kylin Schulty and Crystal Turner,
Right.
who were found murdered at their remote campsite in Moab, Utah,
Right.
back in August of 2021.
August 2021.
And right off the bat, investigators knew that this was no ordinary missing persons case.
Definitely not.
You know?
Targeted, isolated, with no apparent motive. Right.
The initial reports were definitely unsettling.
Yeah, they were very unsettling, and you've gathered quite a collection of sources for us to dive into here.
Okay.
We've got official reports, witness interviews, even some forum discussions that were circulating at the time.
Yeah, some interesting stuff.
Oh yeah, those online forums.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about a rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah.
Remember those early theories about the creepy camper lurking around the victim's campsite?
I do.
It really added fuel to the fire in those early days.
Yeah, it really did.
Gave the whole case an almost supernatural feel.
A supernatural feel, yeah.
It's interesting how quickly speculation can spiral like that.
Yeah, it's amazing, especially in these high-profile cases.
Right.
Before we get to that, though,
Okay.
I think it's really important to start with the victims themselves.
Yeah.
It's crucial to understand who Kylin and Crystal were before their lives were tragically cut short.
Absolutely. From what I've read, Kylin was 24 years old
Okay.
and a real free spirit, a nature lover who was described as a hippie by her friends.
Married a hippie.
She worked at a health food store in Moab and had a passion for butterflies of all things.
Butterflies. Oh,
I know.
interesting.
It seems she was really drawn to beauty, to the delicate and fleeting things in life,
It does seem that way.
which makes the brutality of her death all the more jarring.
Absolutely.
It's heartbreaking,
It is.
especially when you learn that this wasn't the first time that tragedy had struck her family.
Oh, really?
A few years before this, her younger brother had been shot and killed.
Oh, my goodness.
Imagine to lose two children in such a violent way.
It's unimaginable.
Yeah, it really is.
The ripple effect of that kind of trauma, it's something we often overlook in these cases.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
not just the victims whose lives are shattered, it's their families, their communities.
Right.
The impact is so far-reaching.
Yeah, it really is.
And then you have Crystal, 38, Kylin's partner.
Right.
She was a night owl, worked at McDonald's to afford their van life adventures.
Yeah, they really seemed like they were living their dream,
They were.
exploring, the stunning landscapes of Moab.
Mm-hmm.
And then it all went horribly wrong.
Yeah, it did.
They were both described as kind, friendly, well-liked in the community.
Yeah, they were.
Doesn't sound like they had any enemies.
No.
This wasn't a drug deal gone bad
Right.
or a robbery or anything,
Oh,
which, as you can imagine, made it even more perplexing for investigators.
right. Absolutely.
So speaking of the investigation, the Moab Police Department had their work cut out for them.
They did.
Small town,
Yeah.
not exactly equipped to handle a double homicide investigation.
No, not really.
And then you factor in the media frenzy,
Right.
online sleuths.
Yeah.
It must have been overwhelming.
Totally overwhelming.
Small police forces often face that dilemma, don't they?
They do, yeah.
Limited resources,
Yeah.
intense public scrutiny.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pressure cooker.
It is. It is.
And in this case, the remoteness of the crime scene
Right.
added another layer of complexity.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about that crime scene.
Okay.
It was tucked away in the LaSalle Mountains,
Right.
miles from paved roads.
Okay.
Apparently, it was so well hidden that if you didn't know exactly where to look,
Yeah.
you would drive right past it,
Wow.
which makes the discovery of the bodies even more peculiar.
Right.
A woman named Cindy Sue Hunter, a friend of Kylin's father,
Okay.
stumbled upon the campsite.
Just stumbled upon it.
Yeah, that whole thing initially seemed really suspicious, didn't it?
It did, yeah.
I mean, she claimed to have been guided there by some kind of otherworldly force.
An otherworldly force.
No, it definitely raised a few eyebrows.
Rightfully so.
Right.
Investigators always approach those kinds of claims
Yeah.
with skepticism, as they should.
Of course.
Um,
Yeah.
But in this case,
Yeah.
her alibi checked out.
Right.
And Kylin's father vouched for her. So
Can you imagine being the detective on that case?
I know.
You've got 2 young women brutally murdered,
Right.
and the person who finds them is talking about psychic visions.
Psychic visions.
Like something straight out of a movie.
It really is like a movie.
Absolutely.
But amidst all that strangeness,
Right.
investigators had to focus on the hard evidence.
Right.
The campsite itself was exposed to the elements heavy rainfall could have washed away crucial traces.
Oh, wow.
But they were able to recover some key pieces of the puzzle.
Okay. Like what?
Well, like the shell casings,
Okay.
those indicated that the murder weapon was a 9mm handgun.
Okay.
And then there was the bullet fragment they found lodged in the tent floor.
Right. Right.
And ballistics analysis would later become crucial in linking the murder weapon to the suspect.
Right.
And then there was the fact that nothing was stolen from the campsite.
Oh, really?
Kylin and Crystal's belongings, their van, their cash, all untouched.
So that points to...
Yeah, that points to a targeted attack.
Right.
This wasn't about robbery or some random act of violence.
Yeah.
This was personal.
Wow.
Which brings us to the initial suspect pool.
Yeah.
Investigators had their work cut out for them.
I bet.
There was the mysterious, creepy camper
Right.
that Kylin and Crystal had mentioned to their friends.
Right.
This guy was described as acting oddly, even howling at them like a wolf at night.
That's straight out of a horror movie.
I know, right?
But how do you track down a creepy camper in a place like Moab, where
Right.
people come and go all the time?
Yeah.
It's like trying to find a ghost.
It's like trying to find a ghost, exactly.
Then there was the man who had been harassing Crystal at work,
Right.
possibly even stalking her.
Right.
Seemed like a solid lead,
It did.
but his alibi checked out.
Checked out.
And remember all that media frenzy surrounding Brian Laundrie around the same time?
Oh, yeah, the laundry case.
I mean, the timelines overlapped, and
Yeah.
some people were convinced he was involved somehow.
Understandably so. Given his proximity to Moab and the fact that he was known to frequent the same bar that Kylin and Crystal had visited.
Right, right, right.
But investigators were able to confirm his whereabouts and quickly ruled him out as a suspect.
Yeah. But it must have added to the pressure they were already facing.
Oh, absolutely.
Public scrutiny can be a double-edged sword.
Definitely.
Right.
It can sometimes generate leads,
Right.
but it can also muddy the waters with misinformation and misplaced theories.
Exactly.
So in this case, the investigators needed to separate fact from fiction.
Yeah.
And that meant going back to basics, meticulously examining every piece of evidence, every witness statement.
Right.
And that's when a seemingly insignificant detail emerged, one that would change the course of the investigation.
You're talking about Adam Pinkusovich, right?
Adam Pinkusovich, yeah.
The former coworker for McDonald's.
Exactly.
He wasn't initially on their radar.
No.
He and Crystal hadn't even worked the same shifts, barely interacted.
Right.
But his name came up during routine interviews with McDonald's employees.
It did.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Remember that security footage from near the crime scene?
Yeah.
The one with the black Toyota Yaris?
Yaris, yeah.
Well, turns out Pinkusovich owned a car that matched the description.
Interesting.
That was a major breakthrough.
It was.
But Pinkusovich had vanished,
He vanished.
leaving
Yeah.
behind a trail that led all the way to Florida.
To Florida.
It was a puzzle that was about to become even more complicated.
A lot more complicated.
So Pinkusovich trades in his Yaris, disappears.
Yeah.
I mean, that definitely screams trying to cover his tracks, wouldn't you say?
It's certainly raised red flags for investigators.
Yeah.
It's not unusual for perpetrators to try and distance themselves from a crime scene
Right.
and dispose of potential evidence.
Right, so the hunt for Pinkusovich was on.
Yeah.
What happened next? Did they manage to catch up with him?
They eventually traced him to a motel in Iowa.
Okay.
Unfortunately, by the time they got there, it was too late.
What happened?
Pinkusovich had died by suicide.
Oh, wow. So even if he was a killer, they'd never be able to bring him to justice.
Right.
What a frustrating situation for everyone involved.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine what the victims' families must have gone through.
It is a difficult outcome. You're right.
Yeah.
It offers no sense of closure, no opportunity for the families to confront the person responsible for their loss.
Right.
But the investigation didn't end there.
I'm curious about that. What else did they need to do? It seems like the trail had gone cold.
They still had to prove Pinkusovich's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
Good.
The suicide was a dramatic twist,
Right.
but it didn't automatically mean he was the killer.
Good point.
Suspicion and evidence are two different things.
Yeah. So they had to treat it like any other investigation and gather concrete proof.
Right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what kind of evidence were they looking for at that point?
Well, for starters, they needed to establish a clear link between Pinkusovich and the murder weapon.
Okay.
The gun found at his suicide was sent to the FBI crime lab for ballistics testing.
So they were hoping for a match with the shell casings and that bullet fragment from the tent.
Exactly.
What about his personal belongings? Was there anything useful there?
That's where things get even more intriguing.
Okay.
They were able to access data from Pinkusovich's phone, and what they found painted a very disturbing picture.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat here. What did they uncover?
His phone revealed a trove of information about his state of mind leading up to the murders.
Okay.
It seems he had downloaded programs in an attempt to erase his digital footprint.
He tried to cover his tracks digitally too, huh?
He did.
Wow.
But investigators were able to recover enough data to get a glimpse into his psyche.
You know, it's mind-blowing to think about how much information our phones hold about us, even the things we think we've deleted.
It really is.
It's like a digital confession waiting to be discovered.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And in this case, that digital trail became a crucial piece of the puzzle.
What did they find?
Evidence of violent fantasies, including notes that indicated a disturbing fascination with killing and rape.
That's heavy.
Yeah, chillin' stuff.
So not only did his phone place him at the scene, but it also provided insight into his potential motives.
Right.
Was there anything more concrete linking him to the actual murders, though?
Yes. His phone records also placed him in Moab at the time of the murders.
Okay.
And showed that he had fled the state immediately after.
Yeah.
He went to great lengths to conceal his movements, but his digital footprint ultimately betrayed him.
It's amazing how technology can be both a shield and a sword in these situations, you know?
It is.
It allows people to hide in plain sight,
Yeah.
but it also leaves behind a trail of breadcrumbs for investigators to follow.
Exactly. It's a fascinating evolution in criminal investigations.
Yeah, it really is.
We leave digital fingerprints everywhere we go.
We do.
And that data can be incredibly revealing.
Right.
But in this case, there was one more piece of the puzzle that truly solidified Pinkusovich's guilt.
I'm all ears. What was it?
Remember that Pinkusovich had fled to Iowa?
Yeah.
Well, investigators tracked down a friend he had been staying with.
Wait,
And that friend revealed something shocking.
what was that?
He told them that Pinkusovich had confessed to him.
He confessed.
He admitted to killing 2 women in Utah.
Wow, a confession that seals the deal, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just a vague admission of guilt.
Right.
He provided specific details that only the killer could have known.
Like what kind of details did he reveal?
He described how he had shot the women in their tent and then dragged their bodies to the ditch where they were eventually found.
Okay.
It was information that had not been released to the public.
Wow.
The friend's account lined up perfectly with the forensic evidence.
So it seems like they had their man, but was there any suspicion that the friend might have been involved?
That was one of the first things investigators looked into.
Right.
But the friend's alibi checked out.
Right.
Phone records and witness statements confirmed that he had been in Iowa at the time of the murders.
So Pinkusovich acted alone. But the big question remains, why?
Right.
Why did he do it? What could have possibly driven him to commit such a horrific act?
According to the friend's testimony, Pinkusovich claimed that he was angry at Kylin and Crystal for telling him what to do at their campsite.
Hold on, telling him what to do, that's it?
That's what he said.
What does that even mean?
It's unclear what exactly transpired between them.
Right.
We only have Pinkusovich's version of events filtered through his friend.
It's so bizarre, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, if that's all it took to set him off, it suggests a level of rage and impulsivity that's truly frightening.
It does.
Yeah.
It's possible there was some kind of confrontation,
Okay.
a perceived slight that triggered a violent outburst.
Right.
Remember, we know from his phone data that Pinkusovich had a history of anger issues and violent fantasies.
Right. And don't forget those creepy camper reports.
Right.
I mean, if it was indeed Pinkusovich, it seems like Kylin and Crystal sensed something was off about him even before the murders took place.
It really does add a whole other layer of tragedy to this case.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if they had a gut feeling about the danger they were in,
Right.
but dismissed it.
It's chilling to think about. It's a reminder that evil can wear many faces,
Yeah,
and that sometimes our instincts are trying to warn us about something.
that's right.
It's a sobering thought. But let's get back to the investigation.
Okay.
With the confession and all the evidence they had gathered, I'm guessing the case was officially closed.
That's what I'm assuming, but there's always a twist, isn't there?
Well, in this case, the ending is somewhat bittersweet.
Okay.
In May of 2022, officials in Utah announced that Adam Pinkusovich was the sole suspect in the murders of Kylin Schulty and Crystal Turner.
Okay, so they finally got their answer.
Right.
I imagine that brought some sense of relief, even though it came at a terrible price.
It did, But it wasn't the resolution anyone had hoped for.
No.
Because Pinkusovich was deceased, he couldn't be formally charged or stand trial.
It's a hollow victory, isn't it? Justice delayed, justice denied. I can only imagine the mix of emotions that the families must have felt.
Relief that the mystery was solved.
Right.
Anger that the perpetrator would never face accountability.
Yeah.
Grief that their loved ones were gone forever. It's a heavy burden to bear.
It's a stark reminder that sometimes there are no easy answers, no satisfying conclusions.
No.
Just a lot of unanswered questions and a deep sense of loss.
Yeah, a deep sense of loss.
You know, it's cases like this that really make you think and question things.
Yeah.
You know, two young women full of life.
Right.
Their dreams cut short by a senseless act of violence.
Senseless.
And the perpetrator escapes accountability through death. It just feels incomplete.
I understand that sentiment. There's a sense of injustice, of unfinished business that lingers long after the case files are closed.
Right.
And this one is particularly haunting.
Yeah.
Because it forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about the world we live in. I'm curious to hear your perspective on that.
Okay.
What stands out to you as we kind of reflect on everything we've learned?
Well, one aspect that's particularly unsettling is the role of isolation.
Okay.
You know, Kylin and Crystal chose a lifestyle that embraced solitude.
Right.
Venturing into these remote areas with limited cell service. It's a romantic notion.
It is.
But it also made them incredibly vulnerable.
Yeah, it's a trade-off, isn't it?
It is.
The freedom to roam, to disconnect from the grid, often comes at the expense of safety.
Unfortunately, it does.
And in this case, that isolation had tragic consequences.
Absolutely.
It delayed the discovery of their bodies, potentially hindering the investigation.
Right.
It raises questions about the responsibility we have to ourselves and others when we choose to venture off the beaten path. You know, do we prioritize freedom over safety at what cost?
Right. Right.
It's a delicate balance, that's for sure.
It is.
And it's not just about physical safety, is it?
No.
I mean, this case also highlights the dangers lurking in the digital realm.
Yes, it does.
Pinkusovich's phone,
Right.
even with his attempts to wipe it clean, became a crucial piece of evidence.
Exactly.
It's a reminder that our digital footprints are almost impossible to erase completely.
Almost impossible.
Everything we do online,
Yeah,
every search, every message leaves a trace.
it does.
And that data can be used for good or for evil.
Absolutely.
It's both fascinating and frightening, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, in this case, that digital trail helped bring a killer to light, even though he was already gone.
Right.
It makes you wonder how many other cases are out there waiting to be cracked wide open by a stray text message or a forgotten browser history.
Oh, I'm sure there are plenty.
It's a whole new frontier in criminal investigation.
It is.
And it raises all sorts of ethical questions about privacy and surveillance.
Yeah.
But that's a deep dive for another day.
Another day, another deep dive.
You know, as we talk about this, I keep coming back to that creepy camper anecdote.
Yeah.
It's almost like Kylin and Crystal had a premonition, a sense that something wasn't right.
Yeah.
They even joked about it with friends, but ultimately dismissed their fears.
Right.
It makes you wonder, could this tragedy have been prevented?
That's the question that haunts so many cases like this.
Yeah.
You know, could something have been done differently? Should they have trusted their instincts more? It's impossible to say for sure.
It's heartbreaking to think about, but it's also a powerful reminder to listen to that inner voice.
Yeah.
That gut feeling that tells us when something is off.
Absolutely.
If you encounter someone who makes you feel uneasy, it's always better to err on the side of caution.
I agree.
Remove yourself from the situation. Trust your intuition.
Right.
And don't hesitate to report anything suspicious to the authorities.
Couldn't agree more.
It's a lesson we all need to take to heart.
We do.
Whether we're living that van life or simply navigating the complexities of everyday life.
Yeah, well said.
This deep dive has been a sobering reminder
It has.
that even in the pursuit of freedom and adventure, we can't afford to let our guard down.
We can't.
We need to be aware of our surroundings, trust our instincts, and take steps to protect ourselves and those we care about.
That's right.
I think that's a powerful message to end on.
It is.
It's a tragic story, but hopefully there are lessons we can all learn from it.
Right.
Lessons that might help us stay safe and prevent future tragedies.
Absolutely. And perhaps as we remember Kylin and Crystal, we can also find inspiration in their love for life, their adventurous spirit, and their appreciation for the beauty of the natural world.
Right.
Even in the face of darkness, there is always light to be found.
Beautifully put. And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and we'll see you next time for another exploration into the depths of knowledge.